Welcome to She Leads. This time we're going to be speaking in English, so that's something new. My guest today is Astrid Emmerich. Astrid is German, but she's right now living in Brazil. She has a very interesting story and I cannot wait until we start our little conversation and you also get to know her. Thanks also to Woodpecker. Woodpecker made it possible for me to start this podcast and is also a sponsor. Hi Astrid.
Hello.
I'm very excited to be able to speak to you today. You have already inspired me a lot and I would like to tell our audience how I got to know about your story. So my partner told me about you because he started to be involved in your project for i2020. And he said that he usually doesn't do projects so much anymore because he has a full-time position, but he was inspired by the fact that you are a woman leader and in the Fintech industry. And he really wanted to be on your project for that. And of course, the technology also was the reason why he wanted to get involved. But when he heard from Pedro that you are a woman and you are the CEO and the founder of the company, he said, I have to get on board. And that's how I got to meet you, and we talked later, and that's how you are my guest today. So welcome. And yeah, I would like to start off with your background. Like, how come that you are right now working in Fintech? For me, like, my stereotype of the finance industry is very man-driven and man-leader-driven. How come that you are working in this branch?
Well, actually, the most important man in my life, in my first 20 years of my life, was my father, and he was a very successful banker. He was a bond trader in first in Germany, then Belgium, then London, but for an American bank. So he, in the 80s, when the whole investment banking industry started picking up, he was a very important figure, and he always inspired me in his, by talking about his business. I've always loved it. Since I was a little kid, we used to do math games on the beach. I had to learn how to do calculations of percentage and square roots in my head, and I used to enjoy that. So that was the fun thing we did on the beach. And as a kid, I started playing bank, age 12. I remember I was still in Belgium, and I was, mounting the little table, for the representing a retail bank. What I was seeing my mother do when she used to go to the bank. She used to take the pay-in slips and the withdrawal slips, fill them out, and give them money or get money back. So I used to take those pay-in slips and have them there for my dolls with my Monopoly money and a little telephone that was cut off, and I used to play bank with my friend. That was my invention. And my dad, he collected old bond and share certificates. So the value of those shares at Sotheby's at these auctions would rise dramatically if the quality of the actual print was high quality. So since those share certificates were actually used to transfer the ownership of a share from one owner to another, in those days everything was done manually, they had a lot of glue and a lot of stuff stuck onto them or written onto them with pens or with pencils. So I would spend my weekends, hours and hours and hours with highly sophisticated material trying to take off these stickers and the papers and anything that was written on it to improve the quality of the share certificate. And in the process, my dad explained to me what it means. This means that you own a part of a South African gold mine, for example. And this coupon, if you cut it off, if the company has made money, you can give it in and you get money back. So I used to think that's fantastic. So I loved all this. I went into banking at age 19. My father helped me get a position in Luxembourg. And there I went into the best department of the best local bank. I was very, very lucky because I was a German in Luxembourg, which is not so usual. And it was a local bank. And I managed to learn how to do discretionary portfolio management from the age of 19. And I loved it. And I had a talent for it. My boss gave me responsibility of $60 million portfolios. In those days, $60 million is probably worth about $600 million today, that I managed myself. age 20. I was responsible for them. He was overseeing me, but I used to see my own clients by myself, explain to them how we made money for them using bonds, shares, and funds. So for me, this whole business of the stock exchange and the bond market was something that I just loved, and so I continued my entire life in finance. And now fintechs are, of course, the most interesting segment, because we can do what massive computers in massive banks had used to do, we can do now with our own software that we can create, and with just a mobile phone as a very powerful computer in the hands of the users. And those users who most need it, the ones that I most care about, are those that have no access to the financial system and are therefore socially excluded. And these are the ones for whom we can now offer absolutely top financial services at no cost, because we have a different business model. So we can offer it at no cost, and giving them access to what every human person needs in order to run their lives. Yeah. So that's the story.
When I heard about i2020, I also heard that it's not just a solution, it's not just technology, it's actually a currency, which makes it very interesting. And I would like to dive into that a little bit later, like what your business is and what the motto of the business is, and also the mission behind the business. But tell me first, because my husband told me that you revolutionized the financial system in Brazil. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because you had a lot of mind changing and a lot of revolutionizing to do there. Every country has its own rules, of course. South America is very particular when it comes to regulations, and some things are maybe not as advanced yet, like in other countries, or that's maybe just a stereotype. So I would like for you to explain to us, like, what is the circumstance in Brazil, and how did you make it possible for yourself to create this business?
Well, my first fintech was called V-Digital, and that company I started together with a partner, two partners, but one major partner who was a CEO, and then me, and then the person who introduced us, who was our friend and who just kept a small amount of the company, but we both ran the business. And I ran it day to day, and my partner ran his advertising agency, and we basically started because we were shocked by the way the food voucher business was run in Brazil. It was in the hands of 3 companies only, and they dominated, obviously, that enormous market, because the labor laws and the unions in Brazil are very strong, and they demand that every employer gives food vouchers for staff. And if you give one food voucher to one staff, you have to give it to the whole company, from the cleaner to the president. Right, so there's a value that the unions demand. It's not law, but it is something. If you don't do it, you get into difficulties with the labor laws indirectly, right? So this business is huge, and it was dominated by 3 companies only that did something terrible, in my view and my partner's view. They basically used their power of retaining the money that they got from, the clients paid the food vouchers ahead of time, because that's the law. Then these companies retain that money. The people use it every day in restaurants and small local food stalls or little restaurants that were built around their businesses in order to supply the right level of food for the right level of staff. And they then had to wait 35 days to get their money, and they were charged 7%. And if they need to anticipate the receivables, because they couldn't run their business as a small sort of bakery or small little food shop, waiting for 35 days for the money, they needed to anticipate the receivables and charge them another 5%. So 12% of the actual sale went to those very, very, very greedy mega companies. And the worst was that they actually gave a discount to the companies who were paying them the benefit, who had to do it anyway, and would get a tax benefit on this. And they basically got a negative rate. So they were basically taking money from that little small bakery shop and got given that kickback. And that made us so angry that we said, no, it's not possible. Let's just put some technology into place here. Let's work with wallets and just, undercut this market. And that's where I really was revolutionary, because I had to go to Brasilia, to the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Labor, and for 1 year and 2 months, knocking on their doors, giving them proof of how in Asia, in other countries, specifically Asia, the wallets, were so advanced that you can do transactions between wallets completely safely, very clearly defining where the money comes from and where it goes to, which is exactly what the technology can do. And finally, after 1 year and 2 months banging on their door, they allowed the first digital food voucher card to be issued in Brazil. And that was my personal gain, because my partner didn't know how to do it. He was wanting to do it the Brazilian way, with their friends everywhere. I said, no way, we're going to do it the German way. We're going to do it based on facts, based on experience, based on other markets, based on our technology, and explaining that this is the way forward. And that was 6 years ago, or 5 years ago roughly. So that made me really happy, because with that we opened this huge flood of other fintechs that followed in our wake. And they, of course, started to put a lot of pressure on those companies. And yes, we did make a difference. And people, the small little businesses, are not suffering anymore. They get their money within 2 days or even on the same day. In the meantime, the central bank has done something fantastic in Brazil that's very advanced. The central bank has created a new liquidation chamber called PIX, P-I-X, which is an instant payments liquidation system. So all fintechs and all banks can liquidate through that liquidation chamber, and basically have transactions happen instantly between two units. So our i2020 wallets can talk to a competitor's wallet like PicPay, or can talk to one of the major banks' wallet, even bank account. And that has been this innovation that the central bank has done, together with the fact that they basically offered us an IP. Now a company called Payment Institute, Instituição de Pagamento. They introduced that type of company in Brazil recently. And with that, all these fintechs can actually operate and become competitors to banks for basic financial services. There are certain things we can't do because we're not a bank, but we are, we can offer the services we need. So the central bank really caught up, from being extremely behind the curve, all of a sudden being very much ahead of it. And that was great. But before that happened, we did this first push, of basically doing this instant payment with our own system, and which we're still continuing now with in my second fintech, i2020.
Yes, and tell me about i2020, because I know that it is a fintech company, and you also have your own currency, which is called oro, like gold, how did it started? How did you come up with the idea, and who is behind the ideas together with you? Because it always takes a village when you're raising kids or also creating companies. I think that you have to have a good team that you can rely on. So tell us about i2020.
Yes, well, i2020 was born from a spin-off of V Digital. So after 4 years of running V Digital together with my partner, as I said, the central bank had created this new type of companies that could now exist, these payment companies. But the prerequisite is that you have to have a financial background. More than 50% of the shares of an IP has to be in the hands of owners who have financial background. And since my partner had more than 52% of the first fintech, he couldn't be, and he had a background of marketing and advertising, he couldn't be an IP. And I always wanted already, we already started seeing that I wanted to go towards the unbankerized and offer full financial services, and basically go into this entire world of looking after the people who will have their first experience with banking, and wanted to give them a new fintech type of experience of banking, without all the paper, without all the red tape and all the fees and all the constraints, the modern way, like we've seen in Asia happening for already more than a decade, and a lot in Europe as well, and America is slowly coming up as well with this. So my partner and I decided to split, because he was happy with the food voucher business. He was a specialist in marketing, so this is all marketing, and he found two new partners who could take on my position as running the company, as well as bringing contacts within the field of where they needed to be active. And I took my basically the code we split a third of the assets of our original company and basically launched i2020. And so that was a lot of fun. Then I came up with Oro. Before the company currency was called V. Took me a while to work out Oro, but eventually I did. I was reading the number plates in Brazil. The number plates have 3 letters in the beginning and then some numbers. So I was spending about 3 months reading the number plates when I was in traffic, seeing if I could find a 3-letter word that represents what I want to say for my currency. And eventually it said oro. I'm like, man, that's so obvious. It means gold in Spanish. Of course, in Brazil, nobody speaks Spanish, but if you put the U in it, the O-U-R-O, that means gold in Brazil or in Portuguese. So if you pronounce it, it's said quickly, it says oro. It sounds the same as oro. So all of a sudden, Oro was born, and Oro is our own like network, like you would say MasterCard, Visa, Amex. We have Oro, so we can work exactly the same as a network. But we also used blockchain in order to create our own cryptocurrency called Oro that can be minted in the same way as you can mint bitcoins or any other cryptocurrency, and we could launch it when we want to as its standalone cryptocurrency as well, in order to be a value, a currency that has a value depending on offer and demand. Today it has a collateral. 1 real, which is local currency, is 1 oro, right? And it could be $1, could be 1 oro, 1 euro could be 1 oro. This is something we can define, right? Which we've done in Brazil because we operate only in Brazil for now. But eventually, once a network is big enough, once we've got enough people connected to Oro, we can decide to launch it as our own currency. So then offer and demand will determine the price of 1 Oro. And that could be very interesting, especially once we've got the unbankerized hooked up. There's 40 million people in very remote places in Brazil that have not had any access at all to any of the banking services or any cryptocurrency or anything, even though they exist and there's a lot of competitors now. But it is a way of getting to them and communicating with them. And the way we focus our marketing, our communication, is to actually be very inclusive and go through the path of financial education before making somebody download our app and start trusting us. So it's a much more difficult flywheel process. The start of the flywheel is to make people trust us and understand that Oro is good for them. Oro represents cash. It's what it used to be your cash is Oro's now. You can have it in your phone. It can be secure. It can be hidden away from anyone who wants to steal it. You can you can automatically pay your bills and receive money and send money and buy Ubers and Googles and all this directly from the app and have a digital withdrawal from the cash machines around the country. So you can basically operate it, but we want people to understand that we're there for them as a service provider who will give them the financial education in practical terms and not just try and shovel some stuff down their throat and make them believe in some unrealistic, unsustainable cashbacks for some stuff that makes no sense, and thereby just get the downloads, to say that we've got the users. We're not interested in that. When I first launched Oro and everything was done on the marketing side, the first thing somebody said to me, okay, Astrid, so now you have to go and buy your followers. I said, what? I have to buy followers? That was like the most natural thing that the ad agency said we need to do. I said, I'm not going to buy a single follower. I'm going to offer a service that people want. And when they want it, they may want to follow us. They were completely shocked. Yeah. So, there's all this fakeness of this, I have millions and millions of users. I'm not interested in any of that. We built the fintech to be there to make a difference in people's lives, to add value, to help people be financially independent, and for people to understand that they need to, to be careful and try to be the owner of their own productive assets so they can really start creating value for themselves. And that's our big purpose, So that's why I split from V as well, because I had really strong feelings for this, and my partner wanted to stay, and in this great, very lucrative business of the food vouchers, and he's doing very well. He sold the company now to a French competitor for over $25 million. So that was a wonderful, first success and first historic, track record for us. And for i2020, I hope I'm running it for the next 30 years. I have no interest in selling. I want to really go deep into the corners of Brazil and then other countries, and to be there for people who have been excluded, and make them like money, make them enjoy it, make them want to make it, make them want to keep it, and make them want to use it the way I've been taught to do it all my life, and I've enjoyed doing it all my life.
Your story is very inspiring, because when I think about the financial market, I always think about those financial sharks, people that are they want to make money, and all they think about how they can get more and more and more. And I think that very often some layers of society are being used, or are being like overlooked. And many companies are offering loans, or many companies are offering credit cards, but to just a specific type of human, to just a specific type of layer of society. Not everyone is included, and I think that's why i2020's mission is so generous and so yeah, I would say fair, because you do want to include everyone, and even that layer that is maybe not so educated, you want to educate them. And you know, I think that for me it's very fascinating to meet someone in the fintech industry that has this drive, not only to make something of their own, but also to have, like, you know, like a good human to human relationship with others, and want to create a company that also like empowers people and make them feel good. And I saw your commercial that was saying about like small loans, and making people really feel that they have assets, and that they are not slaves to a banking system. And you know, where do you think like this particular thing is coming from? Like, did it come from coming to Brazil and really seeing that society? Because for those of all of you that don't know Brazil yet, it's a beautiful country, and it's full of very inspiring and beautiful people that I love going there, and I love meeting people from there. They have suffered through many bad governments. They suffered slavery. Europe colonized them, which also broke the country in many ways, and we European broke their culture in many ways. And I'm just, was Brazil the inspiration, or something from your background? Like, what inspired this mission of including everybody?
Well, it's a very good question. It's actually Richard Branson, who is one of my heroes. You know, who I read his autobiography, Losing My Virginity, many years ago, and I watched him personally, hands-on, doing what I'm doing here in Brazil, do that to England and to the UK at the time. Because first of all, I used to live in Asia, as you know. I worked in Hong Kong for 6 years, from 1989 to 1995, which was the crucial time of Hong Kong. 2 years before the handover, I left, but this whole push up to the handover in 1997 back to China was this most important and most interesting period of Hong Kong's time. And we watched how when people really want to make a change and they all club together, they can. Because what's happening today in Hong Kong is what we thought would happen in 1997, and basically with people's will and power and wanting and work and hard work and sticking together, they managed to extend that for 30 years. Today, unfortunately, they lost the battle, and it's really going the unpleasant way. But these last 30 years, I've been watching how the transformation of Hong Kong as well as Southeast Asia can happen if people want it to happen. So for me, you know, and I've traveled extensively throughout Southeast Asia, where there's a lot more poverty than in Brazil. Brazil is not that poor at all. It is a country that's seen to be a underdeveloped country, but it's actually unnecessary. There's no reason why one single Brazilian should be hungry or should die from any kind of, you know, scenario, because there's no exposure to temperatures that are extreme. There's no exposure to any kind of natural disasters. There, you know, there is enough food for everybody. You can eat a banana and a mango and a papaya and a fish right away with just picking it up, or coconut. So there's no necessity for anybody to be poor. In Asia, it's much more dramatic because there's so many natural disasters. So I've seen a lot more poverty there. So I've always been very wary of that. And of course, the rise of Hong Kong, all this tremendous wealth, in the same time. It was quite impressive. But the point was, I moved back from Hong Kong to UK, and UK, I've watched Richard Branson basically shake up those very sleepy financial institutions, the banks at the time, which were 5, that were controlling everything as well, like in Brazil. There's 5 banks controlling everything. And they were just saying, well, it takes 7 days to clear a check. Well, too bad. All 5 banks took 7 days to clear a check, so it was 7 days to clear a check. It didn't need to take 7 days anymore because technology had advanced, but nobody cared. And it was the same with telecoms, same with, he started the music business, went to telecoms, and he went into travel with the airlines, and he went into all these different areas where there was a shake-up needed. And he just went there and he did the low-cost model. He basically said, hang on a minute, we're going to put the user first. Let's think about what the client wants. Does the client want clearing in 7 days, or does the client want clearing in 1 day? Is it possible to do it? It is, let's do it. So you win the business. Yeah. The same with technology, with telecoms. He put it all upside down. The same with so many businesses. So I watched him do that with the basis of principle of putting the user first. Today that's like almost a given because of Amazon's model. I mean, Amazon's the most customer-centric company, and that of course came much, much later. But he was the one who shook it up. And we saw how he also put some fresh air into all these stuffy old institutions and gave the power to the consumer, and power to the user, and power to the service taker. And in Brazil, when I came here, I moved to Brazil because I wanted to make an impact somewhere which is big enough where there's still democracy in place, even though it's very, very weak democracy with the horrendous governments. But the fact is there are 200, the same size as America, there's 230 million people here, of which when I moved here in 2006, there was still, it was 100 million people 150 million people still very close to basic salaries, like minimum salary level or below, right? And then it started this transformation from 2006, went up, started to move a little bit, but there's still a huge group. So I came to Brazil on purpose for that. I stayed in investment banking because I need to understand Brazil and understand the culture and get my network going. So I worked in investment banking in Latin America, from Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Peru, Uruguay, and Argentina and Brazil. So that was fantastic for 7 years. Once I had all this knowledge of, and I traveled enough and understood enough, that's when I started, the first fintech and now the second one. So the idea really is that this transformation needs to happen because the customer is king. That's something it's been inside my DNA from day one, because I was educated like that anyway. Everybody's the same. My father, my mother was like this. And, and from Asia, as I mentioned, you could see that, the customer can demand. If you've got, you have to have a competitive industry, and competition needs to drive, the quality of services and the cost down, if it's possible. So with technology, of course, you use finance and technology, and with existing, a very, very, very fast growing tools we have, we can do so much with our own technology now. And that means we can have access, or give access to people that 20 years ago would never in the wildest dreams would have access. Wi-Fi is becoming a commodity as well. With Elon Musk putting 42,000 satellites now into space so that he can beam down cheap Wi-Fi, to or broadband to every corner of the world. Very soon, in the next 4 or 5 years, every single corner will have access, which is correct. Why not? Yeah. And thereby we can, with our smartphones, with our technology, start, really bringing people on board. And we have to do it carefully and not in a predatory way. And most people come to me and say, oh, we also serve the unbankerized. They just want to exploit them and keep the same exploitation, predatory lending. And that is something that makes me so sad, because people, they really don't know better and they fall into it. People today who are our clients are still paying 17.6% for a single transaction on a credit card of their clients, like resellers that we, of products, like Mary Kay, for example. They then charge, the client have to pay them. They have links of payment links that can send to their clients to basically process credit cards. And if the client, like in Brazil, they pay in installments because they tend to have, a certain amount they can pay per month. So they pay over 3 months in order to anticipate the receivables of those 3 months. This poor salesperson is still charged 17.6% on one transaction, one single moment. It's not even per annum. It's now done. So this is criminal in my view. Interest rates, okay, they have started going up again, but they've been at a very low level historically for Brazil, and inflation as well is coming back up now because of the pandemic and all the rest of it. But the actual inflation is pretty much under control, and interest rates as well. We're no longer living in this hyperinflation environment with with the currency devaluing every day. It is not the case. And these people, they can make maybe 35 or 30% margins on these sales, and it takes them a week and a half or 2 weeks to sell. And then they have to give half of it away to a company that is doing this transaction with the technology that costs them nothing. Now, of course, it costs them money to invest. But, it is just, and when you ask them, why are you charging 17.6%? Then they say to me, because people pay, they don't complain. So unless you complain, you do not get the right rate. That's completely wrong. You have to have one transparent fee structure. The same for everybody. Just because you're less educated, you have less information, it doesn't mean you should pay more. So in Brazil, this is something that really makes my skin crawl. And I'm saying Brazil because I've got the experience in Brazil. I'm sure it's in many other countries the same, even developed countries. But the fact is, if they can, they will. Meaning, if the company can get away with charging more, they will. They don't look at how much is the service or the product worth, what does it cost me to produce it, what is the margin I need to have to make the business viable, and that's what I'm going to charge. No, they look, how much can I charge? Does it fit? Yeah, nice, So I can charge this person that's less educated 17.6. That one has already complained, so I've got to can only charge maybe 12%. That one was really smart. I have to already push it down to 8. And this one is going to make a scandal on the social media, so I better only charge him 6. The same people doing the same transaction.
Yes,
this is not right. And that needs to change.
At i2020, you want to provide financial services and educate everyone. But how will i2020 make money?
Well, the important thing is data, right? I don't know whether you read The Economist had this fantastic leaders article a while back. I want to say 2 or 3 years now. I forget now. I think definitely more than 2 years, maybe 3 or 4 years, which was is saying data is the new oil. And this article, I can still send it to you. It is really it's going to be valid for the next 50 years. So it's all about being connected to the end consumer directly. So with the fact that this, especially the unbankerized, who own a pair of sandals, a shorts, 2 t-shirts, and a roof over their head, and a smartphone, you've got their attention because the smartphone is in their hand. It's the most valuable thing they have other than their children, of course, right? So this is the thing. So you can communicate now. And if you're responsible in terms of communicating with your users and you use it for the right reason, you can make the person basically... You can understand what the person needs and be there with what they need at the right time. And some of these things would be reselling goods. And if you resell goods or services, the person who provides the goods or services, like in any store, would sell it to us at wholesale, and we can sell it at retail. So it is the same price for everybody, but we can get a margin from that resale. So we resell Google Play Store tokens, for example. We resell Uber tokens. The client still pays the same Uber as everybody else, but Uber pays us a fee, right? We have Uber Eats, we have iFood, we have some of the software like Microsoft. Very few buy it, but they can buy it. And they can buy directly from our app without having to have a credit card or debit card, because these unbankerized people don't have that. And they shouldn't have a credit card. Credit card would be the worst thing for them because they can't stay on top of it. They have one minimum salary which they need. It comes in and gets spent. So we make money on that. We make money on reselling. Then for the resellers of goods, the micro entrepreneurs, these are my focus group. They resell certain goods like Mary Kay, like Avon, like Natura. Like they will need money in order to buy those goods first, and then they sell it at a margin, and then they have the income. So we give them these working capital loans for 60 days for a specific purchase. In this case, it is a specific purchase of Mary Kay, for example. So within the wallet that we have, there's a card called Working Capital for Mary Kay. And that card only works for purchases of Mary Kay. It doesn't work for anything else, right? So they can't withdraw the money. They can't.
Like a voucher.
Yeah, it's the technology we have. It basically restricts certain things. So they can get that working capital loan from us. They have 60 days to to basically repay it. The idea is it's perpetual, so they can basically perpetually use the money all the time. So almost like an overdraft limit. But in some cases, if the manufacturer has a deal with us, some of them are very concerned and want to also be participating in social impact. They actually sell the goods for less to us, so we have the big enough margin so we can support the whole system and don't have to charge the user. Others don't do that yet, so the user actually pays. But for them, it's much more beneficial financially to use our working capital instead of using that little machine, as I mentioned, and pay 17.6% to get the money, the receivables anticipated for them to use today to pay for the goods. You understand? So the flow is much more natural. They get the working capital. With that, they buy the goods they need. They have the goods, they can resell them. Once they resell them, when the money comes back in, we split it for them already. We do the calculation. We say, that's how much you have to put back into the working capital account, which is the money you use to buy these goods. Then this is your margin. That's actually the money that you made. That's your added value. That's your income. That we can put on your digital account, and that you can spend. And that's freed up, within the wallet. You can use that for recharging your phone, for paying your bills, for sending it to somebody else, for going to a cash machine digitally and take it out. So we basically do what they're so scared of, because none of them can calculate percentage, especially not if it's percentage up and percentage down. They just get completely confused. And so they get panicky, and they only understand absolute amounts, and they understand what comes into the account. So if we do the split for them, that's the financial education we do without having to, push them through any classrooms or any videos or any writings or any readings, which none of this is what they like. They need to get up in the morning, they need to make money, they need to feed their kids, they need to, arrange, feed themselves, arrange their lives, and sell, So that's a lot of fun to see how we can start giving them this, this gentle entry and opening into a wonderful world. I mean, financial world is wonderful, and if you do it well, you feel good about yourself. You've achieved something, and then you can see how you start, earning money. We've got a little card as well. It's called cofre, which means your little piggy bank. So you can put automatically money into your piggy banking. Every day you can start seeing how that is growing, even with small amounts, but it starts growing. So every transaction you do, you just round it up and put a bit more there. You don't notice so much. You spend a little bit more, So
it's very empowering, for sure. It's very empowering, and it's and everyone can manage that. It's not just male driven or women driven. We both need, both sexes need education on finances and also control over our own finances. I think it's a very important thing. And I wanted to ask you about the future of i2020, because you have already spoiled a little bit. You gave a spoiler about that you want to go international, that you would like the currency not just to be Brazilian, because, for example, Bitcoin is an international currency. Is that a plan for Oro as well, or what did you think about?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a license here in Brazil, so we can issue MasterCard, and which is, by the way, included in our wallet, so you can use the whole MasterCard network as well in order to pay throughout the whole world with our wallet. You've got your virtual card for e-commerce, you've got your physical cards for anything to do, and this is connected with everything else that we have in our wallet. So, once we've got the license for Brazil, but it's very easy to extend the MasterCard license for any other country, and also the money, the payment industry license we have here in Brazil. We can get it in America, which is a great market to expand to, other than the other Latin American countries, but also United States. I think there's a lot of unbankerized people, a lot of people who would love to have a different banking experience, because the banking experience in the United States, for me, is very behind the curve. The best banks are in Asia, no doubt, especially Hong Kong and Singapore. They are the best of the best. Then in Europe, in UK, it's caught up quite a bit, but it's still behind the curve, I think. Scandinavia is very much ahead of the game. I don't know what it's like in Poland. I don't know Poland, but I think outside of Scandinavia, it is pretty much in Luxembourg, maybe, the banks are still lagging a lot of consumer-centric, better services and lower fees. So there's a lot to be done. But the places I want to operate is like Ethiopia, for example. Ethiopia is a country my sister knows very well. She works for the United Nations and she's been working a lot in Africa. And she goes on holidays to Ethiopia, for example, another friend of mine as well. It's a country with 80 million people, the size of Germany, and it has everything. But, it is so remote and it's basically forgotten countries from our point of view. But, now with Wi-Fi and with access to technology like we have, we can reach every single corner in Ethiopia or in Kazakhstan or in any kind of, remote place where people have not had any access. Of course, we only ever want to work in countries where we can operate in a transparent way, in our normal way that we can get our bank license or our IP license, I should say, where we can get our licenses sorry about this, we'll get our licenses, set up and basically operate and apply the same model. So the idea is to basically do that in as many countries as possible, and then launch Oro as a currency with a social impact. For example, my dream, this is like 2-3 years down the road, okay? I haven't got time to do it now, but imagine 2-3 years down the road, I would love to have a cocoa coin, for example. So when you buy this kind of Lindt chocolate, you may have at the back a cocoa coin symbol, which says, okay, if you buy this product, so much of that retail price will automatically go to the cocoa farmers, the ones who farm the cocoa. In Brazil, it's very strong, in Africa as well, in other countries. So, and these farmers would get the cocoa coin, that we will create based on the Oro software, or basically, we could call it Oro as well. Let's see whether we do both, or one or the other. And then with that, they will be able to buy productive assets. They will be able to buy machinery, or get more labor, or get, some marketing. They can find a way of financing some marketing campaign to sell to more distributors and so on. So basically giving them a currency, and that currency should then really be worth what offer and demand makes it be worth. So it should actually be a proper currency. So we would launch so many and let them live, let them go their way, because then it will represent an investment for them as well. Because all of a sudden they get these cocoa coins, and depending on how much demand there is, they may go up in value. So all of a sudden you've got these cocoa farmers that have been completely, abused in a sense, because only 6% of the entire value chain in this entire process go back to the cocoa farmers, and that's too little, the retail price. So, and you can do, once you've done the cocoa coin, you can do the coffee coin, you can do the sugar coin, you can do the acai coin, you can do, and all of these can be one unified social coin. With the idea is that it's value, it's a currency that has a value, but always with the angle of productiveness.
Yes, and it sounds like your aim is to try to empower the right people, the people that are the hardworking people, the people that are often overseen and even used from the industry, and that is amazing, and I really applaud you for this, because I have not met many people that are as high positioned as you, and also have such a humanitarian side to their character, and also a sense of mission. It's very inspiring. And
want to give people a voice. People they all have a voice, but they don't use it. I want people to have a voice, along the whole chain, and say, hey, I count as well. I'm part of this. Respect me, and let me thrive with you. The idea is to make money. We're not a charity. We are for profit, and we want to make a lot of profit. But the way that it's good for society, good for the planet, good for us, good for the shareholders, good for everybody. And it's possible. You just have to want to do it. You have to want to make your user need you for the right reasons, and then supply it at the right price, and be transparent and be fair. I don't see why that's so difficult. It is difficult, but it shouldn't be difficult. And Richard Branson has done it.
I think it's different. It's different nowadays. I think that the aim is making money at any cost. And not really thinking about pleasure, or thinking also about being part of the community and giving back because you are in a privileged position where you are able to choose your path, and you are able to give back to people. And so, yeah. I also wanted to ask you, because this podcast is meant for people to get motivated and people to start their own endeavors, to maybe feel that now is a good time to start something by myself, or now it's time to start some projects that I've been passionate about. I'm also one of those people that I'm looking for inspiration and looking for the right moment to start my own thing. And I wanted to ask you, because those conversations are also there to normalize that the path of success is not an easy path. There's not always easy moments, there is not always motivation. We do have moments, all of us, where we feel down and we are not so motivated. And I'm sure that you included. And I wanted to ask you, how do you cope with moments like this? How can you motivate yourself, and maybe share this with us, so we will get a little inspired on how to deal with sorrow?
Well, it is very hard. It really is. What I do a lot is write. I read autobiographies of my heroes, all sorts of heroes, and I watch documentaries about my heroes, people I look up to, and and for that I take a lot in. So my biggest hero in my specific field, it was very relevant to my field, is Dr. Yunus, the man who won the Nobel Prize in 2006. He's a banker to the poor. He's proven for the last 40 years that it's totally possible to build a social banking business and make money out of it and not depend on anybody, and give people this power of being the owner of the productive asset. That's his whole story. He gives people loans, microloans, in all these remote places, and he groups them in five groups of 5, and he gives them attention every week, physically there for the last 40 years, and he managed to have a 98% payback. So he's only got 2% of delinquency, which is much better than all lending companies I know. He's managed to challenge the World Bank, of their model, and all sorts of other existing institutions that we all thought, oh, they know what they're doing. How come this little professor of some university in Dhaka all of a sudden knows better? And he does know better, and he did it, and he challenges. So every time I feel, and he says openly, we've made so many mistakes in the beginning, and we did this and we did this, and he explains the entire process. So this kind of reading really motivates me and makes me, remember that it is a hard journey. It's gonna have lots of hurdles, and they will come every single day, and we have to overcome them. And there will be so much from the outside, so much pressure that will always try to deviate you or demotivate you, or you feel so inadequate. I've left an executive director position in top investment banks, had a very high standard of living, and all of a sudden I've been told every single day now in my current position, you're useless, by the fact that you can't do a meeting and come out with a positive result right away that you can implement, like you've done in investment banking. But you're building something from scratch, so you spend the whole time knocking on doors and being pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. So, you have to have the strength to know that it's always a no. The surprise if it's a yes. So go in with the expectation of having a no as an answer. Having a person who's not interested in innovation, who's only interested in some kind of easy way of piggybacking on you to get to something that's easy for them, to do something that's not the correct way. In Brazil, you have to constantly fight back this thing that people, if you want to speak to business customers, you end up doing all the presentations, enormous amount of work for every single presentation. You go in there, you do your pitch, you do it to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in the company. Eventually they're saying, oh, this is fantastic, everything you do is great. And now what are you going to pay us? I said, what? I have to pay you? I'm supplying a high tech. And, what are the if I can give some kind of tips, what helps me a lot is to to do what Steve Jobs famously said. He said, you have to have a problem to fix. That's the thing you start with. You have to have a problem to fix. If you find a problem that's fixable, you've got innovation. You've got something that you bring to the table that is better than it was before. So you've got to have a problem to fix, and you have to have the passion to see it through. So if you spot the problem, you have a solution for it, and you have the passion to push it through, you can achieve it. Just to see a problem and giving a solution to somebody, and it's sort of a passionless activity, it's going to be very hard to overcome the hurdles, the ones I mentioned earlier, that where you always get the no's. You know, you, by definition, if you're not some established company, some established big business, or some very powerful person, very, financially powerful and so on, the generally the answer is no. You know, you have to do double or three or four times the effort of convincing somebody, because people, if they don't need to do something else, if what they're doing now is already okay, unless it's a new problem, So as Steve Jobs also said, how do they know if they want a personal computer if they haven't seen it? So be inspired by these kind of sayings, because it's easy for somebody who's in a good position doing something else, he doesn't have to sell a personal computer because whatever they're selling now, it works. Why should he bother if people want to, own a personal computer? But Steve Jobs saw that there's a problem, he wanted to fix it. He managed to fix it, put it all into one little box that you can open and plug it in and it works. And that was, what was the big step forward in the massive, innovation. And, he had the passion to push it through, even internally. Because internally you get so many problems. So my advice to you is guard your equity. That's the most important thing when you set up your company. In the beginning, it seems so trivial, but it's not. It's the most valuable thing you have. And the worst thing that could happen to you is that you do all this hard work of having an idea that fixes a problem, putting it into play, creating the technology, creating the marketing strategy, getting the funding, getting it all done, putting it into market, going from 0 to 1, the famous 0 to 1. And then all of a sudden, you get to the point where it works and you don't own the equity anymore. You end up with 20% and somebody else gets 80%. So you work for somebody else. So guard your equity. And there are very good financial engineering tips that I'm happy to pass on to anybody who wants to reach out to me, or you can get from real experts. Be careful with who you ask as well, And the other tip is don't listen to experts. Because if you, by definition, created something innovative, i.e. something that's new, i.e. something that doesn't exist yet, how on earth an expert can know about if it's good or not? He doesn't, or she doesn't. That's true. Because it doesn't exist yet. So trust yourself. But at the same time, when you keep going, which has happened to me, and you constantly bang against something where you just can't overcome it, like we did, we wanted to create our own network and avoid the MasterCards of this world. We thought, no, the innovation is there. Between two wallets, we can do everything. We don't need the guys in the middle, all these acquirers and sub-acquirers and 1,000 people in the middle. Everybody has to be paid to, And then we realized we can't do it. It's explained at V as well as at i2020. It is so hard to get the network registered in an efficient manner in order to be able to make the card and the wallet useful. So I gave in and I became but I did it the hard way. I then decided to actually become an issuer, not just take a bin sponsor for somebody else. No, okay, if I have to do the MasterCard, I want to make it my revenue center. So I'm going to, and also an asset for my company. So I went the hard way as a tiny fintech to be actually an issuer. There's only 120 issuers of MasterCards in Brazil. There's 300 banks and 500 fintechs. So we have one of those licenses. So it took a year and a half to get it. It took 6 months to implement it. So this kind of hard way. So basically there, I actually listened to the demand side. I realized there's something I haven't fixed, even though in my wonderful dreams, in my innovation, we don't need the MasterCards. We can do it, but technology-wise, alone. But if I practically don't have a network, it's no use. So listen to demand, but don't necessarily listen to the experts. Have a very critical view, and guard your equity, and remember to keep a balance of life and work. As your husband knows, for the last month I've been a little bit exaggerating the other way, and I got very sick. So you have to be very careful that you don't exhaust yourself to the point of not being useful for your family or the business or anybody. So that's the hardest as well, because it's a never stopping engine, inside of you, and you sleep, you dream about, you remember things you have to do, then you worry about things. So basically keep your sports, do your sports every day, spend time in nature, spend time with your family, switch the computers off, switch the WhatsApp off, at certain times just don't be available, in order to keep that sanity, so you have enough fuel to keep going for the longer term and see your company thrive, and that's it.
That's very good advice, and together with that we will unfortunately have to finish our little program, but I would like to thank you so much, Astrid, for your smart words and for your advice and for everything that you contributed today. And to all our listeners and our viewers, thank you so much for staying with us, and see you soon on the next episode of She Leads. Bye bye.